In Busan, people said the Kong sisters were beautiful the same way they said the sea was cold, as a fact, without feeling, because some things were simply true and required no further comment. But anyone who looked closely knew the difference. Kong Na-eon was the elder by 14 months. She was the quiet one, the kind of quiet that people mistook for shyness until they knew her well enough to understand it was something else entirely. It was the quiet of a person who had learned, young, to hold things inside because the world around her had too little room for her feelings. She had their mother's eyes and their father's stubbornness and a heart so large and so undefended that everyone who got close to it eventually took something from it without meaning to leave her less. Kong Saman was 14 months younger and had understood from the age of 7 that she was the one people looked at first. She was louder, brighter, faster, the kind of person who entered a room and the room reorganized itself around her. She loved her sister. She did. But love, in Saman's architecture, had always lived in the same wing as competition, and the wall between the two rooms was thinner than either of them had ever admitted. They shared a 2-room apartment in Nampodong, 3 floors above a pojangmaka that smelled of grilled fish and soju every evening. Their mother was in Changwon. Their father had been gone since Na-eon was 12 and Saman was 11, the particular absence of a man who chose leaving over staying and left no forwarding address and only the faint outline of his damage in both his daughters in ways neither of them could fully see in themselves. Na-eon worked at a small architectural firm in Haeundae, junior draftsperson, 7 years in, the kind of steady invisible work that buildings are made of and nobody thinks to celebrate. She took the same bus every morning at 7:40. She ate alone most days and didn't mind. She had one friend she trusted completely and a journal she wrote in every night and a love she had been carrying quietly for 4 months that she hadn't told anyone about yet, not even Saman. Especially not Saman. She should have trusted that instinct. His name was Seo Juno, and Na-eon had met him 4 months ago at the Haeundae seawall on a Tuesday evening when he had asked to borrow her pen. She had thought, at the time, that it was the most ordinary beginning possible. Later she would understand that nothing about Seo Juno was ordinary, and that the Tuesday evening had been chosen, not accidental, but that came later, and by then the ordinary feeling of it had already done its work on her heart. He was 34. He had a lean, considered face and the specific quality of stillness that either meant a person was deeply calm or had learned to perform calm so completely that the performance had become the person. With Juno, for 4 months, Na-eon had believed it was the former. He brought her coffee on Wednesday mornings, he had found out, somehow, which bus stop she used, and was there twice a week with 2 cups and no explanation except that he had been passing anyway. He asked about her work with genuine curiosity, not the polite curiosity of someone waiting for their turn to speak but the real kind, the kind that followed up on things she had said 2 weeks before. He remembered everything. She had found this beautiful. She should have found it something else. On the evening she finally told him about Saman, about her sister, about the apartment in Nampodong, about the way Saman's brightness had always made her feel, not smaller exactly, but quieter, more contained. He had listened with his full attention, his eyes on her face, and said, "She sounds extraordinary." And Na-eon, who loved her sister and was proud of her and had spent a lifetime managing the complicated weather of being the quieter one, had said, "She is. You'd like her." She had said it easily. Generously. The way she always gave. She would replay those 4 words for a long time afterward. She had not planned to introduce them so soon. But Saman had been at the apartment when Juno walked her home that Saturday, had opened the door in her loud Saturday energy, still in her going-out clothes from the night before, laughing at something on her phone, and the introduction had happened before Na-eon could manage the timing of it. "This is Juno," Na-eon said. Saman looked up from her phone. The look lasted 3 seconds. Na-eon counted, later, the way you count things after they become important. "Hi," Saman said. Her voice had shifted, not dramatically, not in any way that would be accusable. Just by a degree. The specific degree of a woman who had seen something she wanted and was beginning, already, to consider the architecture of getting it. "Hi," Juno said. He was looking at Saman the way he had looked at Na-eon on the seawall, with that full, absorbing attention. Except faster. The attention that had taken 4 months to develop with Naeon arrived, with Saman, in the first 3 seconds. Naeon saw none of this. She was in the kitchen getting glasses. She heard them talking, easy, fluid, the specific rhythm of two people who are, immediately, interesting to each other. She stood at the kitchen counter and felt something she would not examine, because the something was an instinct and examining it would require acknowledging what the instinct meant, and she was not ready for that. She brought the glasses out. She sat between them. She smiled. She was good at that, holding herself steady in the space between what she knew and what she was willing to know. She had been doing it her whole life. It started with Saman asking for his number. She told Naeon she wanted to invite him to a group gathering, a birthday dinner for a mutual friend. She said it casually, in the kitchen, not looking up from her phone. Naeon gave her the number without thinking, the way she had always given Saman things without thinking, because that was the economy of their relationship and she had never had reason to audit it. The text started that night. Naeon did not know about the texts. She knew only what she could see, that Juno began canceling their Wednesday mornings, once, citing work, twice, then a third time. That he was quieter on the phone. That the specific quality of his attention, the thing that had felt like being fully known, had dialed back, slightly, the way a radio signal weakens before you've moved far enough away to notice the music is gone. She told herself she was being anxious. She had a history of reading abandonment into ordinary distance, she knew this about herself, had spent years trying to correct it, could trace it directly to the father who left with no forwarding address. She was projecting. She was doing the thing her therapist had called anticipatory loss, grieving departures that hadn't happened. She was not projecting. Meanwhile, 4 kilometers away, Saman and Juno sat in a cafe in Siamayan that Naeon had never been to, and Saman laughed at something he said, and he looked at her the way he had once looked at Naeon on the seawall, except with more certainty now, the specific certainty of a man who has found the version of a thing he was already looking for. Saman knew what she was doing. She did it anyway. That was the part Naeon would never fully understand, not the desire, which she could forgive, but the choice. The sustained, deliberate choice, made again and again over 3 weeks, to cross the line and keep walking. Saman told Naeon about Juno at their mother's birthday dinner in Changwon. She had been building to it for 2 weeks and had chosen this moment, their mother present, a table of food, the social architecture that made a scene impossible, with the specific tactical awareness of someone who had thought carefully about where to say the unsayable. She said, "Juno and I have been spending time together. I wanted you to know. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I betrayed you." Spending time together, the phrase that meant everything and admitted nothing. Naeon looked at her sister across their mother's birthday table. She had known. She had known for 2 weeks and had refused to know, and now she was being made to know in a room where she could not react, surrounded by food she could no longer eat, beside a mother who was looking between her daughters with the expression of a woman who understood immediately what was happening and did not know which daughter to look at. "How long?" Naeon said. Her voice was very quiet. 3 weeks, Saman said. 3 weeks. Which meant it had started the week after she gave Saman his number. Which meant that the Wednesday cancellations, all of them, had not been work. She picked up her glass of water. She set it down. She looked at her mother. She looked at the birthday cake on the counter, white frosting, their mother's name in pink icing, a completely ordinary thing that would now be attached to this memory forever. "Okay," she said. Saman blinked. "Uni." "Okay," Naeon said again. "I heard you." She excused herself to the bathroom. She stood at the sink, water running, and looked at herself in the mirror. She was not going to cry. Not here. Not where Saman had put her, in this room, at this table, with nowhere to be honest. She looked at herself for a long time. Then she dried her hands, straightened her face, and walked back out to her mother's birthday dinner, because that was what Kang Naeon did. She held herself together in the spaces where other people came apart, and she did it so well that everyone around her eventually forgot it was an act of enormous effort and started to believe she was simply someone who didn't break. She saw him once, before she decided what to do about any of it. She had not sought it. She was at the Houndy seawall, her seawall first, on a Thursday evening, the long walk she took when she needed to think. She turned a corner of the boardwalk and there he was, 20 meters ahead, sitting on the wall where they used to sit. He was alone. She stopped. She could have turned around. She didn't. She walked to him. He saw her when she was close enough that retreat would have been a statement. He stood. His face, not guilt exactly. Something more complicated, the specific expression of a man who knew he had done something wrong and had not yet decided what that made him. "Naya," he said. "You can keep sitting," she said. She sat beside him. The sea was the same sea. The wind was the same wind. Nothing had changed outside them. "I should have told you," he said. "I should have ended things properly before." "I need to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to tell me the truth." He looked at her. "Did you come to find me that first Tuesday," she said slowly, "or did you find Salmon first?" The pause was very short. "But it was there." "I came to find you," he said. She looked at him. She was good at reading faces, she always had been, the survival skill of a child who needed to read the room before the room declared itself. He was telling the truth. That was the worst thing, somehow. That he had chosen her first. That she had been real. And that Salmon's brightness had simply been brighter. "Okay," she said. She stood up. The sea stretched out in front of her, gray and huge, utterly itself. "Take care of her," she said. "She's more fragile than she looks." She walked away. He watched her go. He would think about that sentence for years, "She's more fragile than she looks," and he would not know, for a long time, whether she had meant Salmon or herself. She had meant both. The thing about Seo Juno was that it was not his name. Naeon found this out 6 weeks after the birthday dinner, from a colleague at her firm who mentioned, without knowing any of the context, that her cousin had been asked questions about a man named Seo Juno by people who were not police but who had the quality of police, the specific quality, her colleague said, of men who had learned to be very calm at the expense of everything else. Naeon went home that night and looked. She was careful, she was always careful, and thorough, because thoroughness was how she had survived most of her life. It took her 3 evenings. The man Salmon was with was named Han Jisu. He was the second son of Han Myungo, a name that people in Busan's port district knew the way they knew weather, not because they wanted to, but because it was an environmental fact, a force that organized the world around it. Han Myungo had built half the legitimate import business on the Busan port and controlled entirely the illegitimate half, and his sons were being groomed for both sides of the inheritance. The first son, Han Jaiwoo, had accepted. He ran the portside company and was married to a woman from a Daegu business family and attended the right dinners. The second son, Han Jisu, Seo Juno, had been running. Not from his family. With his father's knowledge, with a new name, finding the kind of women who had no connection to his world, who were clean, who were uncomplicated, who could be held at a comfortable distance from the thing he was being shaped into. Naeon sat with this information for 2 days. She thought about Salmon, loud, bright, restless Salmon, who had wanted something that belonged to her sister and had taken it, sitting in a Siamayan cafe laughing with a man whose real name she did not know, whose world was nothing like what she believed it was. She thought about what it meant to know this and to choose what to do with the knowing. She went to Salmon on a Sunday morning. Salmon opened the door of what had become her apartment. She had moved into a nicer place in Gwangan after Juno, after Jisu, had begun paying for things she didn't examine too closely. She was in a silk robe Naeon didn't recognize. She looked, Naeon thought, both happier and less like herself than she had ever seen her. Uni. Not surprised. Wary. Naeon came in. She sat at Salmon's new kitchen table. She put the printed pages down, not much, just enough. "His name is not Juno," she said. His real name is Han Jisu. His father runs the port. Salmon looked at the pages. She didn't touch them. I know, she said. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. You know, Neian said. He told me. 3 weeks ago. Salmon's voice was careful. I know what his family is. I know what he does. A pause. I love him. Neian looked at her sister. She looked for a long time, at the silk robe, the new apartment, the way Salmon's hands had folded together on the table in the specific posture of a woman who had made a decision and was prepared to defend it. He's not safe, Neian said. I know that too. Salmon ah. Her voice dropped to something older, something that lived below the wound of the last 2 months. I'm not here because you took him from me. I'm here because I love you. Those are separate things. I need you to hear me, this man will reshape your life around his. You will become something you don't recognize. Salmon looked at her. Maybe I want to become something different, she said. The silence between them was the length of a childhood. All the shared rooms, the same bus to school, the nights their father didn't come home, the years they had held each other up by being the only other person who understood. Okay, Neian said. She stood. She picked up the papers. Then be careful. And when it becomes what I'm telling you it will become, call me. I'll answer. She walked to the door. Uni, Salmon said. Neian stopped. Didn't turn. I'm sorry, Salmon said. For all of it. I know I don't deserve, I just. I'm sorry. A long moment. I know, Neian said. And left. 8 months later, Salmon called Neian at 2 a.m. She was crying, not the performed crying of someone seeking sympathy but the raw, physical crying of a person whose body has understood something before their mind has finished processing it. Neian heard it and was already putting on her shoes before she asked where. The address Salmon gave was in Yongdo, a warehouse district by the port, the kind of address that did not belong in a 2 a.m. phone call. She found Salmon sitting on the pavement outside a building that had 3 black cars in front of it and 2 men standing by the door who were not police but looked through Neian with the flat attention of people trained to assess and dismiss civilians quickly. Salmon was in an evening dress. Her left cheekbone was swollen. Neian sat down on the pavement beside her without saying anything. Salmon's face told the whole story and Neian read it in 30 seconds, she had seen something she was not supposed to see. She had asked questions she was not supposed to ask. And Juno, Jisu, had not been the one to hurt her, but he had stood in a room where someone did and had not stopped it quickly enough to mean anything. I told you, Neian said. She said it very quietly. Not as accusation. As grief. I know, Salmon said. Are you safe right now? I don't know. Neian stood up. She extended her hand. Salmon took it, her older sister's hand, the hand that had been there at every version of this, every 2 a.m., every floor they had sat on together. She pulled her up. Come on, she said. We're going to Changwon. Uni, Hill. Let him come to Changwon, Neian said. And there was something in her voice that Salmon had never heard before, not anger, not fear. A kind of absolute clarity. The voice of a person who has already decided what they would do and is no longer afraid of the cost. They walked to Neian's car. The 2 men by the door watched them go. Nobody stopped them. He came to Changwon 3 days later. Neian answered the door. Their mother was in the back. Salmon was asleep, she had been sleeping for most of 3 days, the specific sleep of a person whose body is processing something their conscious mind can't yet hold. Juno stood at the door. He looked different. Not worse, exactly. More decided. The composure was the same but now she understood what it had been trained against. She understood the architecture of the man in front of her. I need to see her, he said. She's sleeping, Neian said. Neian SSI. He stopped. Looked at her. I know what you think of me. I don't think of you, she said evenly. I think about my sister. I didn't want her to get hurt, he said. I need you to know that. I believe you, she said. It happened anyway. What you want and what you cause are two different things, and you are old enough and smart enough to know that. She looked at him. You came to this city. You gave yourself a different name. You found my sister through me. You knew what your world was and you chose to bring someone into it who didn't know how to survive it. A pause. I believe you didn't want her to get hurt. And I need you to go. He looked at her for a long moment. She loves me, he said. I know, Naeon said. Go anyway. The silence at the door was the weight of everything she hadn't said, all the months, the seawall, the Wednesdays, the birthday table, the pavement outside the warehouse. All of it present, none of it spoken, because this conversation was not about her and she had decided that a long time ago. He looked at her one last time. She held his gaze without difficulty. He left. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway of her mother's house, the house they had grown up in, the floor they had sat on the night their father left. She pressed her back against the door. She let her eyes close for just a moment. Then she heard her mother in the kitchen. Then she heard Samin's voice calling from the back room. She pushed off the door. She walked down the hallway. Spring returned to Busan the way it always did, suddenly, all at once, the cold simply deciding to stop one morning as if it had somewhere better to be. Naeon had a new apartment. Not new exactly, she had moved within Nampodong, one street over, a second-floor place with a window that showed the sea. She had not planned to move. She had woken up one day in November and understood that the old apartment, with its pile of both their shoes by the door and its shared bookshelf and its 10 years of accumulated saman, needed to become a chapter she lived in, not a room she stayed in. The new apartment was hers in a way the old one had never been. She had chosen every piece of furniture herself. She had a plant she talked to. She had the window with the sea. She had a new person at work she was beginning to trust, cautiously, at the pace of someone who had learned the cost of giving access too quickly. He was a landscape architect named Dowan who asked her questions with the specific, non-strategic curiosity of someone who was genuinely interested in the answers. She was not ready to call it anything. She was not ready either. She ran into Samin in March at a market in Nampodong. They stood in the vegetable aisle and looked at each other. Samin looked well. Quieter than before, less of the reaching brightness, more of something that looked like herself meeting herself on the way back from somewhere far. She had left Busan for 7 months and come back. She was working at a small gallery in Gwangali. The silk robe and the Gwangin apartment were both gone. You look good, Samin said. So do you, Naeon said. A pause. The market moved around them. Can we get coffee? Samin said. Not today. Whenever you're ready. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. Her voice held. I miss you. Naeon looked at her sister. She thought about all of it, the birthday table, the pavement, the door in Changwon, the 14 months of learning to be the only one of herself that she had. I'll text you, she said. Samin nodded. She looked like she might say more. She didn't. She picked up a bunch of spring onions and moved down the aisle. Naeon watched her go. She stood in the vegetable aisle of the Nampodong market in the spring light, and she felt the complicated, irreducible, unfinished weight of loving someone who had hurt you deeply, and the specific exhaustion and grace of not yet knowing if that love was a wound or a way forward, and being willing, finally, to sit with not knowing. She went to the Houndy seawall that evening. Alone, by choice, on purpose, because some places need to be reclaimed. She sat on the wall. The East Sea was doing what it always did, being enormous and honest and entirely indifferent to the smallness of human grief. She had loved that about it at 22 and she loved it at 33 and she thought she would probably love it at 60, if she made it that far, if she was still coming to this wall to think things through. She thought about the past year in the way that you can only think about something once you've come out the other side of it, not reliving, but surveying. The view from the other shore. She had lost a man she thought she loved and found out the love had been real, which was the hardest kind of loss, not the kind you can dismiss. She had been betrayed by the person she loved most in the world, and had found that the betrayal, though it broke something, had not broken her, and that the thing it had broken was perhaps ready to break, had perhaps needed the breaking, had perhaps been the specific shell that kept her too quiet, too contained, too willing to be the stable weather in everyone else's storm. She thought about Dowen from work. She smiled without meaning to. She thought about salmon in the market, spring onions in her hand, saying I miss you with her whole face. She thought, some people love you badly. Some people love you well. Some people love you badly and would love you better if given the chance, and the question of whether to give the chance is not a moral question, it is the question of what you can hold without losing yourself. She had lost herself once, being everyone else's steady weather. She was not going to do it again. But she was going to text Salmon. Maybe not this week. Soon. The sea moved. The city behind her hummed and breathed. The spring night was cold still, the way Busan spring nights were, the warmth coming but not arrived, the season in progress, honest about the distance still to go. She sat with it. She let it be unfinished. She was calm Neon. She had learned, at cost, that she was more than the quieter one. That her steadiness was not absence. That the people who mistook her composure for a lack of feeling had simply never been given access to the feeling, and that who she gave that access to, from here on, was entirely and finally hers to decide. The sea agreed. It had always agreed. It had just been waiting for her to hear it.